Good morning. Today's topic is activism and resistance. We are asking, what does it mean to be an activist? What motivates you to take a stand on the critical issues of our time? Are you willing to stand up for social, economic, or environmental justice? Climate change, women's rights, blue whales, what are you willing to fight for? Do you think we need to rise up and build a resistance movement to challenge and shift power structures of the country? Or are you content to sit back and let others be the change makers? So I think it's useful to provide a definition for those who maybe don't know what is activism, and it is defined as taking action to affect social, political, economic, or environmental change, or all of those things. Sometimes it's an individual action, but more often it's collectively done through social movements. It can take many different forms, things like direct action, civil disobedience, protests, occupations, campaigning, boycotts, just general education and awareness raising. Then there's demonstrations, lobbying, writing letters, petitions. And then there's also community activism, things like mutual aid or setting up food cooperatives. And apparently our caller is back on line 1.
Hi, caller, you're on the air. What's your name?
Hi, this is Robin. I don't think I was the first caller, but I snuck in.
There you are.
Hi, Robin.
Hi. I thought it was interesting when you put out your email that you let people know what the topic was going to be. That some people were saying, I don't consider myself an activist. I consider myself, I find that some people have a funny reaction to that word, and they go, oh, no, I'm an advocate. And I thought that's really interesting. I have several friends that I have fought alongside for different causes, and they will always say, I'm not an activist, I'm an advocate. And I thought it's funny how there are different people's personality types that could get called forward for a cause that resonates with them, that when they're early on and doing activist work, because I think that's the right term, because activist means you're actively engaging, whether it's quietly behind the scenes letter writing or whether it's standing up in a city council meeting and calling, truth to power. So I think that's an interesting dynamic, and also for people to think about. I think a lot of people are more activists than they realize by the little actions that they take and speaking up or being engaged in the community that you're in. But one of the things that interests me is what about activism is hard? And one of those things that happened here in our own community is I was very involved in trying to advocate and take activist actions for Drake's Bay Oyster Company to remain in our community. And that was an activist stance that put me at odds with some friends and members of the community, and I talked to other activist friends in other areas that said they never do activist work that involves their local community. They'll only do things that are bigger, like the GMO movement to stopping GMOs and labeling GMOs, which I'm very active in. So I find that that's the hardest part to me about being an activist and taking those stands is when you're doing something that's sort of in your own backyard.
Knowing that half of the people in your community are not going to agree with you.
Yes, or maybe only a few, or maybe 80% don't agree with you. So that was the real rub for me when, I became involved with that. Before, I had been very heavily involved with the educating the public and my feeling that GMOs should not be allowed. That was something that the bad guys were Monsanto, and they weren't my friends at dinner. So I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about that. But I do feel like one other little thing that I hope people will address is when you've been in a hard, long-fought activist battle, very frequently you might lose that battle. My husband and I, for many people know, lost our home to a battle with T-Mobile in Point Richmond. But Paul, you and Donna often said, we're chipping away at something oftentimes, so you don't see the one big win.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and it's about seeding, isn't it? It's about seeding the dissension, seeding a different point of view. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Robin. That's all great points.
Okay,
Thank you, Robin.
And we will get to
what everybody else has to say.
Thank you very much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Michael Stalker.
Hey, Michael. Hi.
Michael.
Hey, Paul. How you guys doing?
Thanks for calling in.
Yeah. Good springboard.
Uh-huh.
Am I on the air right now? Or?
You're
you
on
are
the
on the
air.
air.
Oh, gosh, okay. yeah, the previous caller brought up a couple of really great points. One of them has to do with how do we label ourselves in the actions that we're doing. And, I find the work that I'm doing oftentimes. Oops, somebody dialing in again? Yeah.
Okay.
Crosswire.
I'm finding the work that I'm doing.
And you're a sound man, and we do a terrible job at sound here sometimes.
Yeah, listening to the phone ring was really attention-getting from my standpoint here. But anyways, talking about how do we label ourselves in terms of, the term activism can actually be bandied around by folks who, it's a little scary. I typically don't call myself an environmentalist because it's a similar type of thing. It's been painted with a bad brush from folks that I actually need to do work with, like the U.S. Navy or regulators or legislators, what have you. So, I kind of couch those terms. I don't lobby, I educate, and I'm a conservationist and so forth. So it's important.
Hey, Michael, would you like to tell people on the air what you actually do?
Oh, yeah, I'm a marine bioacoustician. I run a nonprofit organization that does research and policy development on the impacts of human-generated noise on marine habitat. And what I kind of came out of was, many years ago, I found that a lot of these proposals that were being put forth by the U.S. Navy or by the Department of the Interior were essentially put out by people who were physical oceanographers or physics folks, and the biology folks were kind of dismissed as being sentimental because they were worried about, of course, animals getting hurt, or they weren't even, kind of being considered because the field of physical oceanography includes animals as kind of input devices, but not necessarily a sentient response. It's kind of it's a soft science. Biology is considered a soft science.
So in your activism, you're dealing with institutions and government departments, and it's really a business for you. You're in the business of activism, yeah?
I guess you could say that. I wouldn't wear that on my sleeve when I'm going to Washington, D.C.
Michael, you've had some success, haven't you, recently? I thought I heard where the Navy has agreed to suspend some of their underwater noise-making. I don't know the right term for it.
Yeah. Well, essentially, I call it success because we essentially got NIMS to back away. They had, it's kind of a long process, but the Navy had an awful lot to give away. They had a shocking number of takes that they were requesting from National Marine Fisheries Service, and NIMS was kind of going along with the gag, and we had essentially NRDC was leading the charge on the thing, but we were one of the plaintiffs on it. It was really stunning amount of animals that they were proposing naming, and so we managed to get them to kind of rearrange, and they worked well. It was a fun sandbox. We managed to kind of get stuff ironed out in a way that allows for them to get the work done that they need to get done, but also was not as damaging as they were initially proposing. But as I said, they had a lot to give away, so they walked away from the table not hurting too bad.
Well done, Michael. Thank you. This is great because we're hearing all the different ways of being an activist. It's wonderful. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you for your work, Michael.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we have another caller coming in already. This is great.
Hello, caller. You are on the air. What's your name, please?
My name is Brent Turner.
Hi, Brent.
Welcome.
Hi, Brent.
Hello. Well, I just wanted to chime in with a little bit of activism regarding election system reform.
Okay.
So I don't know if you're familiar with the current state of affairs in Marin County and in the rest of the state of California, but we're still utilizing the type of systems made notorious by the Diebold Corporation in 2004, and the counties are waiting for replacement and relief, but unfortunately the HAVA, Help America Vote Act, monies that were available to purchase the $4.5 billion worth of Diebold machines is no longer available, so there's quite an issue regarding what to do next. And so as a point of activism that the California Association of Voting Officials has undertaken for the past decade.
And can I help clarify, or you clarify, please, for us? This has to do with not trusting that voting machines can be reliably tallying the vote?
Yes, the issue is that the software code that is inherent to the current systems is proprietary, is a corporate secret.
It's not open source for the public to have an access to see that it's actually working as it's supposed to, right?
That's absolutely correct. There's some architectural issues with the systems as well.
What are people doing about that, if anything?
What are they doing about it?
Yes.
Well, San Francisco County is currently, hopefully, we're going to have an event at the Elections Commission this coming Wednesday, the 21st, at 6 p.m. at City Hall in San Francisco. San Francisco, through Supervisor Scott Wiener, is pioneering the concept, as mentioned, of open source systems that will reduce costs and increase the transparency, therefore the security around the systems. So that's the hope for California, is that once San Francisco moves in that direction, Marin County, Contra Costa, Alameda, the Bay Area counties will join in partnership with that effort, and then hopefully the state counties will follow, and then the rest of the country, as is the norm with many activist issues. But this one we find to be paramount, as we can't get a proper vote count. So
I think what we're interested in is how the activism, what form the activism takes. So in your case, it would be attending these meetings and making your voice heard, making comments in the chambers and all that.
That's correct. Contacting the Secretary of State Padilla and mentioning your advocacy for open source, specifically General Public License version 3 open source, is a good task. Contacting the local registrar in Marin County is good, to tell her to take part in this effort.
Yeah.
So it's traditional civilian involvement. Thank you very much, Brett. We have to move on. Thank you for your work and your success. Hi, caller, you're on the air. What is your name, please?
Bing Gong.
Hey, Bing.
Hey,
Hi, Bing.
Hi, guys.
Well, you've been our local West Marin community activist for a long time.
Yes.
Yes, I have.
And
we've been partners on Post Carbon Radio a long time, Bernie.
Yes. Well, I'm proud of that program being on the air for as many years as it has been, bringing news and awareness to our community.
Yeah. Well, I just want to put in a push for getting people out on the streets. I was in New York last year, 400,000 people on the street. I think there's a groundswell happening with the Pope coming, and I think people are really resonating with him that climate change is a moral issue, and we owe it to future generations because decisions we make today will impact the planet they're going to be living on. And I guess that's why I'm an activist, because I have children and grandchildren.
Yeah.
And you're agreeing that more people need to get out on the streets, right?
Yes, absolutely. There's going to be, well, we know that the UN climate negotiations in Paris this year, COP21 in December, there I see big mobilization happening there. I think there'll be 1 million people on the street, probably the biggest climate demonstration.
Bing, I remember when Michael Stalker, you and I walked in San Francisco with Occupy San Francisco. For me, that and Occupy in Oakland on the shipping port were the two times where I felt a really strong emotional upwelling with large groups of people. I haven't felt that in the smaller groups or in the move-on marches and stuff that I've done. So did you have some similar sort of emotional reaction to Occupy?
There's something about being on the streets with masses of people that you're fighting for the same cause. There is a kind of a euphoria, in fact. That's why they're kind of celebrations.
Yeah.
And I just see that that's the only way we at the grassroots can speak out is being on the street.
Well, you can be in your community and being an activist in your community, and it's not until you're with thousands of people in the street that you feel like you're not actually alone, right?
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
The change is possible.
and I want to put in a plug for the local rally here in support of pushing the negotiators for climate action. There's going to be a rally in Oakland on November 21st. It's a Saturday, and it'll start at Lake Merritt and 10:30 and march to Franco's Iowa Plaza, where there'll be speakers. And I just hope to mobilize a lot of people here in the Bay Area to go.
And help
Great.
facilitate carpools, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks,
Great.
Bing.
Perfect.
That's
Thank you
great.
very
Thank you
much,
so much
Bing.
for joining the show.
You're welcome. Good luck.
And thank you for your work.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know. Over the last 15 years, we've had the biggest demonstrations and, peaceful protests in history, but they haven't yet resulted in any kind of political change that I've seen. So I'm not sure what it's going to take to make a change. 400,000 people on the streets of New York is a significant number. I've been in demonstrations myself with that numbers, but I don't know if it's enough.
The change I'm seeing is actually on the other side, where the people in power are arming the police in greater numbers and changing our constitutional rights and freedoms, really interpreting it such that the right to protest is getting marginalized. And so I see that the people in power have been arming up significantly, and the opposition is scattered.
That could be taken as an encouraging sign, then, that they're worried that people are going to rise.
They are. They know that people are going to be in huge trouble with
So
the
they
droughts
know.
and stuff, the climate
They
changes.
know we can make a difference.
Hi, this is Amy Trainer, the director of
Amy.
the National Action Committee.
Welcome.
Hi, Amy.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah.
Well, you've taken some heat in this community, haven't you?
Yeah, a little over 5 years, but I have to say, from my sort of philosophical perspective, it made me stronger, it made me wiser, it made me truer, it made me, more passionate and a better person. So.
Wow.
All good stuff.
That's a great outcome for activism, I'd say.
I think it's the best possible, and we managed to be successful in saving, an extremely special place, Drake Cicero Wilderness. So I do want to talk more generally, though, about, if that's okay, about I know environmental
Please.
activism the best. I'm a proud, self-proclaimed environmental activist. My activism includes advocacy, it includes education, it includes science, policy, law. I think, importantly, you have to really understand your issue to know, which agencies, local, state, federal, have jurisdiction. All too often, there's overlapping jurisdiction of agencies. Who are your interested party? What are their interests? What's their legal standing? What's their sort of policy or personal interest or experience with the place or the issue? Is it a, for example, the Environmental Action Committee was the only organization in all of Marin County to join a statewide lawsuit to try and stop the state of California's Department of Food and Agriculture from implementing its quote-unquote pest management program that would allow the state to come in and spray over 79 toxic pesticides around our waterways, our schools, our communities, undoubtedly have impacts to our organic farms, and just our overall health and well-being.
There's always that wolf at the door, isn't there?
There always is, and so, Paul, I very much appreciate the great work that you and sweet Donna, rest her soul, did.
Thank you.
EAC is definitely trying to continue that torch in multiple ways. So, for there, it was, okay, we went through many people have been much more engaged, but when it came down to it, EAC, we felt like this was such an important issue to our community. We were willing to join a lawsuit along with the City of Berkeley, the Environmental Working Group, and numerous state and national organizations like the Center for Biological Diversity. We just felt like this is the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. When it comes to oil spill prevention, preparedness, and response, an issue I worked on in the state of Washington and have been working on here at EAC for almost 3 years. Luckily, I got some funding to spend time in Sacramento this legislative session. And while I would do anything that we wouldn't have had the oil spill that we did on May 19th, because of the work EAC has been a leader on over the past, like I said, 3 years, we had the legislation, a really comprehensive oil improvements in a comprehensive way in a bill ready to go. And Senator Hannah Jackson, a great environmental leader in the California State Senate, picked the bill up, and I worked closely with her staff and the Senate Natural Resources Committee staff, just excellent staff there. Right. And Governor Brown signed that bill into law. I'm very proud of that last Thursday. So, EAC, and from my perspective as an activist, it really is about what is the issue and having this kind of, bigger picture view of what's the issue and where you're trying to go. How far do you think you can realistically advance something in one move?
On that issue, Amy, this is Bernie. I've been a huge supporter of EAC and all the achievements really won in terms of working within the system. Does there come a point with environmental issues where working within the system is no longer effective or insufficient in that, we're moving to mass extinction. We're having all these species go extinct every given day, that time is not on our side in the environmental arena. Can you see us moving outside of the electoral system and the established government system to take even stronger reaction?
Absolutely. There's a huge benefit in that, and I'm so glad that there has been a growing movement thanks to people like Bill McKibben, chaining himself to, the White House gates was that 2011 and getting arrested and drawing attention to climate change. And that kind of civil disobedience has really propelled media attention, which has sparked this great movement. And here we have our presidential candidates, at least on the Democratic side, this is a big issue. They're talking about it at last. It's taken way too long. But yeah, it's absolutely time people recognize, the sense of urgency is palpable. When you have a caller mentioned the Pope. Yep. I was very touched by his encyclical. He gets the urgency. This is about humans as well as animals, and he calls it God's creation. And I think that's a beautiful way to look at it. And if that gets people to act, then fantastic, because you're right, it's about mass extinction, and it is about, there could be catastrophic events that we can't even comprehend right now, could be coming. Mm-hmm. Things are so off.
Right.
Things
we have no idea.
Intense. Yeah.
Yeah, the Pope is such an inspiration, a global activist, I would say.
He is, and he's given cover, to some of our political leaders, to come out and take strong positions. I mean, a year ago, did we think China and the United States were going to have such vocalized such strong positions? I mean, there's a tremendous momentum going into the December talks at Paris. I think it's a very exciting time, and actually, I've been invited. There's a project called Letters to the Future, and I've been invited to submit a letter, and it's basically writing a letter to family and sort of my tribe 100 years from now, sort of telling them what it was like and kind of predicting what will come out of Paris. So I'm looking forward to sitting down and writing that.
Well, thank you for calling in, Amy, and good luck with your next position.
Thank you so much for your important work, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.
My name's Andy Caffrey. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Andy.
Hey,
yes,
Andrew.
we can hear you.
We have a U.S. presidential candidate on the line, folks.
What?
That's right, and a lot of your listeners may recognize my name because I've been running to be our congressman for the last 2 elections.
We remember in the Democratic primary when you ran against our local Norman Solomon and Jared Huffman, who wound up taking that seat.
That's right. Well, I'd like to make 3 points here, kind of related to the last two callers. The first one is there was some news that was made in May 2014 that I seem to be the only person to get what's going on, and that was the announcement that the collapse of the West Antarctic ice sheet is now unstoppable. Now, this is something I was talking about in both those races, and what it means is it's gravity. There's no way that really is unstoppable. That was the word that NASA uses, and it means that a 20-foot global sea level increase is going to hit the planet this century. 20 feet. That's going to wipe out 80 of the 100 biggest cities. And one of the things people don't get about it is this isn't a natural phenomenon. This is directly because the climate denialists have allowed CO2 levels to get up to 400 parts per million.
Can I challenge you for a moment?
The level is 290, so
Andy?
way out of balance.
Andy?
What's happening is we have not yet called out these politicians, the supporters of the coal and oil industry, as the traitors that they are.
Andy, take a breath, Andy. I'd like to interact with you a little bit. Andy, this is Bernie Stephan. Just when you held the deniers culpable for this dilemma, wouldn't it be fair to say that all of us are complicit in this problem, whether you're a denier of the climate change is happening, or if you're someone that believes that it's a simple solution that politically can be solved by investing in renewables? Aren't we all complicit in this problem rather than putting it all on the deniers?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, as you know, and I'll give you an analogy, which is, let's say you have a convention, you got 100 firefighters there with all their equipment and all the water, and then somebody tosses a cigarette into the lawn next door, and the firefighters don't respond, and it burns down. Well, who caused the building to burn down? Both the person who threw the cigarette out and the people who didn't act when it was just a grass fire. And so what I want to point out, the second point is, if you look at these Republicans who are running the show and a lot of the Democrats, they literally do meet the diagnostic criteria for psychopathy. And if you go out and you protest in the streets, which I've been doing and with everybody else for the last 30 or 40 years, the idea is that those people would respond to this public pressure. And the point I want to make is that's not the case. The only choice we have is what I've been calling an electoral revolution, and Bernie Sanders is now echoing that with his call for a political revolution. And my revolution is about us becoming the politicians, that we literally have to get focused on how we can take advantage of these kinds of radio shows, YouTube, social networking, to build a movement where leaders of the communities replace these corporate plutocrats. And if we don't get serious about that, what's going to happen is this 20 feet of sea level increase, this has now been echoed by James Hansen, who says we're going to see 10 feet of sea level increase in the next 50 years. Well, all of our coastal nuclear power plants are 5 feet above sea level.
Yep.
They take 60 years to decommission, which means that all of the world's nuclear power plants on the coast are going to go Fukushima 30 or 40 years from now if we don't start shutting them down now. Mm-hmm. People need to do what Earth Firsters do. With Earth Firsters, we have to stop a clear cut. And if you don't stop it by the day that they go in with the chainsaws, you lose. And that's the way it is with global warming. And a lot of people in the global warming movement are acting like, well, the movement's growing, Bill McKibben's doing his thing, but we're not doing it in time, okay? And so that's what I want to emphasize, is that people, first of all, look into what I'm talking about with the collapse of the ice sheets, and then start to recognize how these people have absolutely betrayed humanity and how we've just let them do it.
Yep.
Andy, this is Bernie again. You're singing my song in terms of the urgency, but when you talk about a electoral revolution, actually, I'd want to go a step further and really collapse our nation and our state for their governance and bring it all to the local community level, as you indeed indicated, local leaders, all of us really being concerned within our watershed, within our communities, within our bioregions, making our own self-governance happen here as the only way to really stop this corporate civilization.
Well, but if these coal plants keep going, it's not you and I. I mean, we might be able to fight some development here on the North Coast, but if they build these coal plants in other places, and we're at 400 parts per million, it's got to get down to 290.
Take the grid down.
Possible. If we don't do that, we lose it all.
You're right.
We lose the planet.
It's urgent, and I actually advocate taking the grid down, breaking the pipelines, breaking the rail trains, breaking the system.
Can't believe you just said that on air, Bernie.
Well, sure, because Andy is bringing up the urgency that's real. And I remember on your last campaign, Andy, one of your slogans was "There's no jobs on a dead planet," and that's while all the politicians keep pandering to bringing the economy back, to creating more jobs. And every time I hear pro-industrialization of and systems, I hear destruction of our ecosystems.
I do want to give you some hope, though. You may remember that in 2012 I smoked a joint to support...
And you inhaled.
...dispensaries, and I got on national TV, and there was nobody else who was talking about this. And a few months later, Colorado and Washington passed their laws, and then President Obama ended mandatory minimums. I think that as a Democratic congressional candidate from the Emerald Triangle, Obama literally was responding to my call. And likewise, for a year, I've been sending the Pope my materials on the climate. And I think, I'm not taking credit for it, but I think just being a candidate, even if we can't get elected right now, if people become candidates seriously, we can get more attention to what has to be done. And they realize that we're threatening their place in power when we're running. Because look what's happening with Bernie Sanders. Nobody thought before he ran that he had a chance of getting more than maybe 10 or 15%. But the people recognize what's going on. And we have to play for keeps here. We can't just go down to San Francisco and do a demonstration for something. And I'm not discouraging people from doing that, but we can't just do that.
It has to be
as a way uniting, and like what you're saying, we have to come together and figure out what the new society is going to be like. What is a post-fossil fuel society going to look like? What does it mean in Marin County? How do we redesign and replan Marin County? What do we do about the people who are making their living off of things that are dependent on fossil fuels now? We've got to do that kind of planning, and I think a lot of people, what I found as a candidate is that most people don't want to do that. Right. Most people would like to elect me to Congress and have me fix it for them as a congressman. Well, one congressman can't do that. You know, and Bernie Sanders is saying that too. He's saying we've got to have, it's not just him. You can't just elect him to be president. We've got to have his political revolution. And this is what it's all about right now for activism in 2015. It's not just resistance. It really is about a revolution.
Great. Thank you very much, Andy, for your work.
Andy. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, and can I just direct people to my website?
Sure.
Okay.
It's Caffrey, that's CAFFREY, 2016.org, and I'm trying to launch a Clear the Coast roadshow to teach supervisors about the need to start shutting down those nuclear power plants now, so I could really use people's help either financially or in setting up events for me to speak at, so we can get the nation focused on this, because no one else is doing it, and we've got all this great stuff here on the North Coast.
And you're a great example for
the pot growers, back to the landers, the whole thing. This is the place where the rest of the world is going to learn from.
You've been a great example, Andy. Thank you very much for your call.
And we have another caller on line 1. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
My name is Jack Gishite.
Jack, hi. Welcome
Jack.
to the show.
Welcome.
Hi, folks. I'm, first of all, just really, thanks for having the show. I wish you could do it every single day. I don't know whether it took me a while to call in. I hope you're getting a lot of listeners. It's just wonderful to offer to the community.
Well, thanks. You're making it happen by calling in.
Yes. So, let's see. I don't know you guys, and I'm embarrassed to say that. I live in San Geronimo now, about 7.5 years. I came from San Francisco for a dozen years, and before that, New York. But I do proudly call myself an environmental activist, just a citizen who uses artwork, actually, as the centerpiece of my activism, specifically for trees and forests, to raise awareness about the critical role they play in our lives. And it's called the Tree Spirit Project. Yeah, I'm inspired really by the other callers and want to sort of speak to their issues as well as the things I was calling in about, but it's all kind of the same thing. So
it's all part of a broad spectrum of activism and advocacy, and we need to go at every point.
I think art, it teaches people at a deeper emotional level. It gets to the places and conveys what can't be said with just the facts.
Right. Well, one of my lines is I speak about the critical role of trees and forests, and of course the natural world, because we're not separate from it. The trouble with language, the limitations of language there. The critical role trees and forests play in our lives, both globally and then also personally. So globally, is we were just talking about climate change and global deforestation contributing to it, and I mean we can go on and on to that obvious arena we've just touched on. But then also personally for me, which is how I come to activism really from a personal level, which is my, as I think many people, especially in West Marin, my childhood love for trees and forest. I mean, I choose to live in an area I'm surrounded by trees. I'm standing underneath redwood trees as I speak to you, and I love them. I mean, I'm a 55-year-old man who is, as I'm getting older, I keep using the Picasso line. I think he's the one that said he spent his entire life learning how to paint or draw like a child again. So for me, as an adult man raised out of New York, where you get to have a tough, thick skin and speak quickly and be really tough, and you fight the man and you fight the system. I mean, anger and fight and resistance all has its place, but as I've gotten older, it's actually, for me, again, my personal journey is about learning to be more vulnerable and speak about love for things. So it's what I want to advocate for, what I want to see more of in the world. When we turn our attention to trees and nature, then we will be more, naturally then active to protect things, whether it's, pesticides here in West Marin or trees over in East Bay. I want to touch on that in a moment, but it comes from a personal place. And then I speak from my heart, and of course, you need science and facts and issues and intelligence and adult perception as well to add to the mix. But without that grounding of the personal and why these things are important in my life, it just becomes another kind of crazy, passionate, wild, mad stump speech, which can attract some people with that similar energy, but can also just turn off people. It's too overwhelming or too much anger or too depressing. So I keep going back to, the love. And just specifically, if I can jump in, I just want to throw something at you guys and see if you're aware of it. Do the listeners know about the latest kind of ongoing effort in the East Bay? So it's our community still. It's the largest deforestation in the SF Bay area in 100 years. Approximately 450,000 healthy trees are targeted for, they say removal, I say chainsaw.
Are they eucalyptus trees? Or are they what kind of trees are they?
Exactly.
I do know about that.
And when you throw the word eucalyptus in, then it changes the tone of the discussion.
Right.
Well, those are invasive non-natives, and we're off to the races.
Yes.
To mimic Michael Stalker, who just said, I absolutely consider myself on an educational campaign. I'm not fighting with anybody. I mean, it's really a divisive issue, because even the local Bay Area chapter of the Sierra Club backs the plan to cut down almost 500,000 trees, and then you round up in Garland to treat the stumps. So for me, they're
Monsanto is always laughing to the bank when that happens.
Yes, they are.
Say again?
Monsanto is always laughing all the way to the bank because they're using their herbicides.
Sure, but as you guys said, we're complicit. I mean, I moved into this house, and there was 100 pounds of toxic chemicals, which the sweet old people I got the house from, old people, like really old, like 10 years, 15 years older than me.
Wait a minute, you're talking about some of us now.
Right. No. That older is, 10 years ahead of us or 20 years ahead of us. Right? But anyway, there's snail poison and drain poison, and, I mean, this is what we grew up with. Although, as I talk often on the road about this stuff, Rachel Carson kind of told us all in 1962, at least the West.
Right.
Hey, this stuff, you can't just kill one thing and not have residual harm done. They're poisons that kill life of all kinds. Yeah. And Monsanto does a good job because they're money. But I didn't really realize until I got involved with East Bay the extent of it. It's $5 billion of toxic chemicals were purchased by the federal government in 2014.
Yes.
Half of that was for Roundup.
It's disgraceful. Well, we need to do a station break right now, but thank you so much, Jack, for calling in.
Thank you for your work. Activism through art. We love it.
Sure. Thanks very much. It's peacespiritproject.com, if you don't mind me throwing a plug.
We got it.
Peacespiritproject.com.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I was just going to say that I've been an activist for over 30 years, since I was a teenager growing up in the UK, and it's always been a drive to take a stand for wildlife, so environmental activism for the living earth that I saw being raped and killed all around me. And, later on, I thought I'm going to have to find solutions to capitalism and consumerism. But over the years, I've been involved in lots of direct actions, campaigns and protests. But more recently, well, I guess not that recent, in the last 15 years, I did a BA in Environmental Arts and Activism, specifically guerrilla arts activism at New College of California. And I just wanted to tell what I did, which is I designed these posters that targeted Chevron as the biggest polluter in the bay. I named, shamed, and blamed them, and then I got out at night and pasted them all over the Chevron gas stations around.
Like a graffiti artist you were.
Yeah, like a graffiti artist. And I don't know if it raised awareness or changed anybody, but it felt really good. And the other thing I did is I did a political theater component, and we actually targeted Monsanto, who were still around.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know, seriously. And we took, we made puppets, and we dressed up, and we designed this little play, this sort of 15-minute skit, and then we took it to the supermarkets around Sebastopol and Santa Rosa and just performed it. And we got quite an audience for that. I mean, people that wouldn't normally maybe think about these issues were gathering around and, had a spirit of it. I just added vitality and energy to the message that we were giving. So I think art plays a very important role.
Songs often are a big part of a movement. There
Slogans and songs.
Songs, yeah. I mean, I remember when I was growing up, our anti-war movement was really led in many ways by a music cult. Drugs too, but the whole anti-establishment was something there in my youth that started me on that track, and I was quite disappointed when most of the hippies turned into yuppies, and I was one of them.
They know how to get to you.
But we did admire those people who took a stand in the forests, in the logging in Northern California and throughout the Northwest. Sure. The idea of monkey wrenching was a political hot button where some people felt, well, you can't endanger the lives of the loggers. But if you see the loggers as part of a system that is endangering future generations, as we can now more clearly than ever see, it's really, there's no innocent party here. And the people themselves may be innocent, but when they're acting on behalf of a system to destroy an ecosystem, then I think it is fair for the other side to introduce beyond nonviolence. Nonviolence has been a big mantra in progressive movements, but there are people who are going beyond that. Deep Green Resistance, Derek Jensen and others have been calling for sort of helping the collapse of this industrial civilization.
I just want to point out as a member of Deep Green Resistance that they do not promote violence against people. It's violence against the machine.
Yeah, and there have been cases like down on the peninsula where a PG&E substation was shot into, and a lot of people believe that was part of a resistance movement, and trains derailing, pipelines being broken. There's a lot of efforts by a few people in the underground trying to help derail the system. I don't think it's effective enough, but it's really hard to see how we're going to get beyond the systems that control our lives.
I personally believe that social change requires force. And why? Because it's not a mistake. That we have to take the power away from these power holders and dismantle their institutions. We're talking about concrete systems of power that have people in them with a purpose. And they know what they're doing. And I think we need activists and a coordinated resistance movement to try and take that down. I think it's building. I think it's happening. But a lot of people are afraid or complacent or distracted by their devices. I wanted to give a couple of quotes by Frederick Douglass. He was an African-American social reformer, an abolitionist, a statesman, and a former slave. And he said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will." He also said, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress." And the final quote from him is, "It is not light that we need, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake."
Hear, hear.
Yeah. And I got an email from Fred Smith, who was a former EAC executive director and is still working with FarmLink, I think it's called. Anyway, he wrote this because he couldn't listen in today. "Activism was fundamental to the founding of our country, to equal rights for women, ethnic minorities, and homosexuals, to spurring government legislation to protect endangered species, the air we breathe and the water we drink. Enshrined by the First Amendment, the right to free expression and assembly is vital to maintaining a free society. That said, activism is not just speaking up publicly about issues, it's also about the daily choices we make as consumers. It's a paradox to me that some people will speak out about income inequality, women's rights, or protecting native species, but also consume from companies that pay low wages to their workers, deny paid paid maternity leave to new mothers, or grow industrial GMO commodity food products. To me, activism is about making a few big statements and hundreds of little ones. That's Fred Smith.
Thank you, Fred.
And we have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Hi, this is Robin again.
Robin again.
Hey, I wanted to just say one quick thing. I read a report that came out about 4 years ago. It was a comprehensive report. I can't remember who put it out, on global warming and on climate change and disruption. And in that report, there was a segment that included actions like what indigenous people are doing and connected with deep green resistance, disruptive actions. And they showed that disruptive actions, all kinds of little ones added up, were actually one of the most powerful things starting to slow down the process. I'll try to look that report up, but I remember it really heartened me that they were saying those disruption factors, they didn't have to be huge, but just enough here, there, and everywhere, were probably one of the most critical things we can do instead of focusing on, carbon sequestration and all those other things exclusively, but remembering that the disruptions are also very, very helpful and
Because
powerful.
it takes away their concentration on the job that they want to do, and they're having to deal with the results of what you're doing.
Absolutely. Great show, you guys.
Thank you so
Robin.
much
Robin.
for calling in.
Robin reminded us of groups like in Natives in North America, the Idle No More movement. Then you had ranchers in the Midwest where the XL pipeline construction had begun, who would put themselves in front of the bulldozers and stop that construction. So what Robin is reminding of us, there's a lot of it happening throughout the country.
Civil disobedience is still a powerful thing, as long as you're disrupting the motions that they have set in place, right?
Well, they're examples to me. The problem is I haven't seen us coordinate to a high enough degree to really make substantial change. That still, to me, is happening primarily within the political system. Like the Bernie Sanders revolution is taking hold in many people's lives. And people mentioned Bill McKibben, but I really want to go beyond that and say that renewable energy is a green dream and not something that we can just give lip service to and say we can continue living like we're living. That this international industrial capitalist system, Naomi Klein, the Pope, others have called it out, but we aren't really taking action to bring that system down yet.
I think some people are the Occupy movement, which hasn't disappeared, and Idle No More, which is the indigenous grassroots organization that you mentioned. And then, Brazil's landless workers movement is also, that's a massive social movement, the biggest one in Latin America with 1.5 million people that are actually, it's a kind of Occupy movement because the rural people, the poor people there, are taking back unoccupied, unused agricultural land and redistributing it to rural workers for small-scale farming. That's pretty revolutionary.
Absolutely. Well, they're fighting for their continued existence, right, as a culture against this Western culture that's coming in.
And what we have to remember is that, the country couldn't operate if the people refused to participate in its current systems because there are more of us than them.
I've become unpopular amongst many of my friends, including my family, when I've declared that I'm no longer voting. For me, and it's an act of resistance and activism, and it allows me to keep trying to redirect folks. I'm somewhat of a keyboard warrior. On social media, I'm constantly challenging people who mostly on the progressive cause as going not far enough. And I feel right now we need revolutionary thinking to get us out of the current paradigm in our thinking before we really take to the streets and the guns and all that. I don't think we've come together yet as having a common understanding of the severity of the problem and how deep we must go in terms of our cultural shifts.
We're nearly at the end of our show. If you'd like to call in, the number is 415-663-8492. And, as an activist, as I said, for over 30 years, most of my closest friends and allies are activists. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to sit back and let the world burn around me. I just couldn't live with myself, I feel called to be a voice for those that have no voice, to take a stand as and when I can, just in my daily acts. It's a mission on earth. It's my responsibility as well as a privileged white person, which I think is key. As, I'm an integral part of this industrial machine, and not so much the marginalized people. Yes, so much the privileged white people, of which I'm one. And I think that is a responsibility to get out and do the work to support, those marginalized people, including marginalized animals and plants and the earth, because they don't have a voice either. And I also wanted to say to you too, and to the people who are listening, that part of our activism is doing this radio show, that we're agitating people together into thinking about the important issues of our time, and hopefully inspiring some of you to take a stand on whatever issues are burning in your heart.
Just to think about things, about different subjects, right?
And getting a chance to call in and share it with the community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yes, your point about not being able to sit there, with Donna, she had no choice but to do what she did, because she just couldn't sit by and watch the poisoning happening around her or seeing the injustice. And
yes,
she couldn't just sit down and say, oh, well, someone else will take care of it. She just wasn't built that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I wish that we all felt that way. I believe that, as I said before, that we need a culture of resistance, that we need to name the true enemy, which is the industrial civilization, imperialism, and consumer culture, and that as a privileged white person, and assuming many people who are listening to this show are also privileged white people, that we have a responsibility to use that privilege to help the marginalized, the poor, the voiceless, the defenseless. And for me, that is mostly the living earth and all her critters. And I also take a particular stand for women in this patriarchy, and especially I stand as an ally to women of color and the indigenous people of this land. The times of crisis that we're in also offer opportunities for real change. I believe we can create together an economy and society that is more just and sustainable. Alternatively, we can just go down this same destructive path to annihilation, and or we can take the other path. And what type of society or civilization emerges from this unrest will be determined in large part by our actions. You are listening to KWMR. I'd wish to thank all of our listeners and all of the callers that called in today for your participation. I hope you'll tune in every Thursday at 11, because your voice really does matter.